I guess we first met in a club, and it was a Cuban bar, I believe, and I had a very different impression at the time. But I thought you were a very cool
Oh,
guy, and that hasn't changed. But
thank you, thank you. It's kind of you to say. Yeah, I think I was with one of my banking clients actually, and then we met you at the next table and we had a chat.
yes, indeed. Yeah, so that was kind of the start of the relationship, and I really appreciated how you had kept in touch with me when I was on my travels and just kind of checked in a couple of times. So, yeah, I'm very happy to welcome you onto this podcast. I think you have a lot of interesting things to share, both within and out and without of recruitment. So I think we can get into some of this. But first of all, I just want to, so our audience can have a little bit of a background about yourself, how long you've been in recruitment and what you're doing currently.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to introduce myself. Thanks, Libby. So, yeah, I'm from the UK. My name is Alexander Jenner. I've been in recruitment now for 11 and a half years. And I currently head up financial services for Huxley Japan, which is our fintech, banking, and insurance go-to market brand for SThree. And so S3, it's a global STEM-focused recruitment agency. From the UK originally, we have about 3,000 people. In Japan, 130. And specifically in Huxley, where I am, we've got 16 people currently. And we've hired a few more. So from next month, we'll have another few people as well. So yeah, basically financial services, banking, insurance, fintech is what we do.
Excellent. And how long have you been in the recruitment game for?
Yeah, so 11 and a half years currently. Very random that I ended up here. I've got pretty unusual background, I think. Actually, I was originally a scientist.
Hmm.
A bit random. I can talk about how I started as a recruiter if you like.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so why I'm even in Japan, I'm from the UK.
Hmm.
I basically came to Japan originally. I got a scholarship to study astrophysics, believe it or not, MSc and PhD. So I was doing that. I was down in Kyoto working on sort of quite esoteric, but the James Webb Space Telescope. And
Wow.
I was, they paid for me to get to university. It was great. And then once I was finished there, I moved into the financial services industry and I got hired by a Japanese company as a quantitative analyst. So essentially, I was using math, which I had done in physics, to look for price movement patterns. And the company traded commodities. And so I was sat there every day in Excel doing some C programming, very little human interaction apart from with my manager. And it was interesting. I liked doing it. Obviously, I like mathematics. But after a couple of years of that, no one spoke English in the whole company. So it was super domestic, but great experience. My Japanese is around like between N2 and N1, so
Hmm.
okay, but certainly not completely fluent. So it was a good challenge. It leveled me up, but I just wasn't speaking to anybody. And I like networking. I like talking to people. And so I realized, okay, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. But as foreigners in Japan, as you probably know well yourself, there aren't that many options for us if you want to make good money, if you don't want to work in a Japanese company, and nothing wrong with a Japanese company, but the salary rises tend to be very gradual. They're quite domestic in how they work, so that wasn't really an option for me. And so, what are the options left? I think you can start your own business. You've got to have a very clear idea what you're going to do. You can get sent here on an expat package. That's a great way to come to Japan. In my case, that wasn't an option. Or you can do sales recruitment. And so plus the fact that I got to talk to a lot of people was I decided, okay, let's give it a go. And I interviewed with a number of companies and famous companies in Tokyo. And was just starting, but when I joined, there were two people in the company. And honestly, I
Really?
had no idea what I was getting into. Not only joining a new industry, but joining a company which had basically not started. I didn't realize that it was going to be challenging in two ways. But I stayed with it, and the company's obviously grown. It's now 130, and it's been successful. But that's how I randomly ended up in recruitment. I think nobody goes to university thinking they want to be a recruiter, or certainly not many people. So most of us
Hmm.
ended up here randomly, and I wanted to stay in Japan. Yeah, kind of found my way here, but because of the background as a quant, it made sense for me to do FS financial services recruitment. So that's how somehow I ended up here.
I see. Well, that is a very unique background. I think most of us are coming, myself included, coming from an arts background.
Right.
I'm
Okay.
I'm curious, I guess, just in terms of having this scientific mathematics background, do you think that that has shaped the way that you recruit in some way? or has it helped you?
I think definitely. I mean, physics in general, it sort of teaches you to break down any problem or idea into core components so that you can understand what's going on and then you can work from first principles. So I think it's a useful thought pattern to have. But in terms of recruitment, I mean, recruitment is a combination of art and science, but there's a lot of science, and I think you can't you can't do it without either. But if you're just sort of only thinking about an arts perspective, the human side, I think you're going to make the job a lot harder for yourself. Being aware of the numbers, working backwards, keeping an eye on them, and understanding how the whole thing works from a conceptual perspective is pretty important. So yeah, for me, I think I'm good at that, and I do think of everything from a numbers perspective because
Mm.
it's a sales job. So yeah, I think it helped me a lot actually. I had to sort of the sales side was the harder part for me at the beginning because I hadn't done that.
Mm. So you said the sales side, and I don't know if this is connected, but I do want to ask, especially to leadership like yourself, for the young recruiters that are listening that are maybe
Hmm.
struggling, was there a time that you felt like it was really a struggle and you had to overcome almost wanting to quit potentially? And can you give us a little bit of a story surrounding that?
Sure. I never wanted to quit because honestly, when I came into recruitment, I didn't expect it to be that difficult. I'd been in
Hmm.
astrophysics and I'd done quant trading, so I thought, recruitment can't be that hard, surely. But actually, it
Rocket
was really
science,
tough.
recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, so I thought it'd be an easy move, but actually it's hard, especially at the beginning. So look, for anyone who's new coming into this industry, the first couple of years are going to be hard. You're going to have to work very hard. You don't know much. There's a steep learning curve. You don't have a network, and you're up against a lot of other people who are really good. So you're going to have to work really hard in the first couple of years. And I joined SThree, which was, as I say, just starting. And I found it hard for two reasons. Number one, we had no candidates, none on the database. We also had no clients at the beginning. So when I first did a search, zero people came up, right? And this was 11 and a half years ago. LinkedIn was just brand new in Japan. There weren't many people on it. So the value of a recruiting company's database back in those days was a lot higher than it is today. So we'd get a job, never exclusive because we were new, and we were up against big agencies and successful long-term agencies here. And I had no database. We'd have to go on LinkedIn, so we had to be really fast. I was not fast, to be honest. I was used to working
Hmm.
in a job where you had to be correct because if we made a mistake, we'd lose lots of money. So I was just not fast enough, and I would overthink everything. Yeah, look, recruitment it helps to be logical and smart, of course, but action is everything. And as long as you're doing, there's more than one way to do recruitment. But as long as you're, not doing anything crazy, the speed is everything. And I was just too slow, and that I had to really change my approach, and that I found quite challenging because I wasn't used to that. And I had to overthink everything. It doesn't matter if it's perfect, but action is everything. As you know, you're top biller yourself. It's challenging. So that I had to change, and the company, as we got better and I got better, it improved. But yeah, how did I get around it? Refusing to quit, working along it was honestly speaking,
Hmm.
in the first 2 years anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it's a similar story, I feel. I was never a mathematician. I was never a rocket scientist or astrophysicist or anything. I remember falling asleep during AP calculus in high school, actually, and that's when I knew I was done with math. But I do feel like I have that my brain is constantly going. When I joined recruitment, I had the same kind of analysis paralysis at the
Okay.
very start. And I remember even on my, maybe it was the second day on my training day, my manager, my, yeah, I don't know if he was my manager at the time or he would be my future manager. But he came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Don't think about it, just do it." And in this game, you just have to jump in and go for it. And I just remember having to turn my brain off a little bit. Maybe for someone like yourself, it's hard to do that. But um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, my first manager, he said, right, it's time to find your first client. And then he's like, here's the phone number, call this company. And I was like, well, let me do some research. And he was like, no, just call them right now. Say this. And then he was standing there and he wouldn't go away till I did it. I was like, okay. And I called this person, and probably the worst BD call ever. Hi, can we come down next week? And then she said yes, and I was like, oh my God, they want to talk to us.
Wow.
And in hindsight, I was lucky, right? Normally, the first call doesn't go through,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's just action,
Yeah. I mean, maybe in
action,
that
action,
case, if
action.
you have one number and that's all you have, then maybe you do want to do some research and make it into a warm call. But
Yeah,
kudos.
I mean, I had the title of the company I had. He was like, "It's all you need to know. They do this, and we're a IT specialist. Call them, tell them we've got candidates. We'd like to meet them." And yeah, I was like, "But what if they ask these questions? Just call them. Just call them."
Yeah. That's
So that was
very
hard for me. I think a lot of people face that, but
hmm,
action
that's
is
very old
important.
school. Old school. But it's the key. I want to shift the
Hmm.
conversation into a little bit of a different direction. I'm noticing this map. The podcast listeners won't be able to
Oh,
see this, but there's this big map on the
oh, this
wall.
map.
I'm just curious, what is what is this to you? Is this just a decoration or
Yeah, it's actually wallpaper. It was the largest world atlas I could find. It's produced by National Geographic in the US. I love traveling, so I've been to I think 77 countries so far. There's about 200 right in the world.
wow.
I'm somebody who likes to see the big picture of anything. So a map of anything, whether it's a recruitment landscape or the world, is quite useful for me. It's how I think, big to small. So I look at the map often. So the UK where I'm from is like this big, which is crazy for such a small country. So the US is a huge on the map. And then I decide where I might like to go. And then I find places and islands and things like that that I haven't been to and just get inspiration really. And it's also a reminder of that we're in, where we are to keep perspective on the bigger picture just in my personal life as well.
So there's some deep meaning behind this, and it's also connected to your hobbies, I guess. Is traveling, I guess, your main hobby or something within traveling?
Yeah, I mean, I do like traveling. Seeing different cultures, different places is always interesting. In terms of hobbies, I've got three big hobbies that I really sort of pursue. So they are, in no particular order, scuba diving. So I actually lived in Indonesia for a year when I was in my early 20s and worked as a dive master, diving in the coral reefs. And I am a leader in a dive club actually in Tokyo. We go diving a lot on Izu Oshima Island off Tokyo and
Wow.
overseas as well. So I do that a lot of weekends and we train people to go diving. And yeah, I mean, the world underwater is fascinating. Um, you know, Essentially we're in a two-dimensional sphere here. When you go underwater, you're in three dimensions suddenly, and it's very
Hmm.
meditative as well because you can't talk for an hour essentially. So you've got your own thoughts, and you've got the ocean, and it's exciting, and you never know what's going to show up. So there's always that
Hmm.
excitement level. So I love diving, and of course traveling is a big part of that. So Asia, fortunately, has some of the best dive locations in the world. So Japan's really well located. Skiing as well, another place that Japan's good for. So I do a lot of skiing every year, which is fantastic here. And then mountaineering as well. So I'm not a professional mountaineer, but I try and do some pretty interesting climbs when I can. So yeah, I guess those are what I do in my free time.
Wonderful. I don't know if there's going to be another recruiter that I'll interview that's more adventurous than yourself.
I don't know, there's a lot of recruiters, but I enjoy adventure. So
Yeah, it sounds like it. I like to scuba as well.
okay.
I think I haven't never done it in Japan like Honshu. I have done it in Okinawa, and that was pretty cool.
You should come diving with us. We go a lot, and we've got a really good club. It's international, mixed Japanese, foreign. So Izu Oshima Island. It's an island just 2 hours south of Tokyo. There's actually coral reefs there. Crazy to realize.
Wow.
And there are hammerhead sharks, schools of hammerhead sharks.
No way.
Yeah, and they're not dangerous. Just for anyone who's worried about sharks.
Yeah, yeah.
Like 50 at a time. Every morning we get up early and we go into the water. You walk off
What?
the beach, and there's streams and streams of hammerhead sharks. Crazy. Between June and November, it's just close to Tokyo. I mean, not very well published or publicized. So, yeah, you should come and join us. Great
That's
group of people.
insane. What's the depth for the hammerheads?
Yeah, it's not deep either. 10 meters,
10
basically.
meters.
Yeah, 10 meters. So
So you could snorkel it too.
you could actually, you could snorkel it. What we usually do
Wow.
is we go down and we just sort of sit there on a rock and they stream past. It's incredible.
Wow. I was in the Galapagos in March this year, and
Oh, wow.
I thought I have to go all the way across the world to see hammerhead sharks and these big schools, but I guess it was right in my
Right on your doorstep.
backyard. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
wow,
cool.
Galapagos. Yeah, somewhere I was on my bucket list, hopefully in the next year to go to. Lucky you. What a great place that is.
It was a lot of fun. But you were just in Argentina, I think, in South America.
Yeah, I was actually in January, extremely long way from Japan. I flew
Hmm.
Tokyo, Sydney, then I took a plane from Sydney to Santiago in Chile. It's the longest flight in the world, which away from any land. Skims Antarctica, and then went to Argentina, and we were there with a couple of friends to climb Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in the world outside of the Himalaya Karakoram ranges. So it's just under 7,000 meters, and it's the world's highest trekking peak. So it's not technical, but it's extremely high altitude. So it takes sort of 3 weeks on the mountain to climb, and a lot of that is acclimatization. And I'd never been anywhere. I'd never climbed Kilimanjaro or anything like that. The highest I'd ever been until then was Mount Fuji at 3,776. So I was doubling in one go. It was challenging, very life reaffirming experience.
Wow. I remembered just hiking up Fujisan and also in Machu Picchu, I was getting altitude sickness. I cannot even imagine doing double that and more.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how I'd cope because you don't know, and being
Hmm.
fit helps, but it's not necessarily. One of the
Yeah.
guys on our trip was a Swiss professional trail runner, the fittest man I've ever seen in my life. And at 6,300 meters, he came down with severe altitude sickness, and he had to go down. Otherwise, his life was at risk. And so he was super fit, way fitter than I was. So you never quite know. I was apprehensive, certainly. And once you get above 6,000 meters or so, helicopter can't rescue you. So you're on your own. Um, and so it's like, wow, okay, from here on up, only I am getting me down, which was, yeah, concentrates your mind, certainly.
What drives you to go and do something like that?
I think that's mountaineers are kind of unique people, and I don't describe myself as a mountaineer because real mountaineers are extremely tough mental people. I think adventure is part of it, but I wanted to. It was an achievable goal. It's not like climbing K2 or anything, which is completely crazy. But it was an achievable goal, but it was a real stretch, and just pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. It's really, I think, an important thing to do. We all have a comfort zone, and there are walls that we feel safe within. And if you go way too far out, you panic. But I sort of always try and push those walls out a little bit. And to do that, you go out of your comfort zone, but not too far out of your comfort zone. So I see, I guess, my life in professionally or personally is always trying to expand the range of what I'm capable of doing. And that was the next step. And also, I had designs. I was like, maybe I want to climb Everest one day. And that's kind of in the, well, if you want to do Everest, you got to do Aconcagua first. And actually, you know what it taught me? Now I realize I don't want to climb Mount Everest because it's a huge commitment. It's dangerous. There's queues of people up there these days. It costs about 100,000 US dollars. It takes months and months, years of your life training. And then I realized, yeah, okay, actually, I don't think I want to do that. But I was happy I went to Aconcagua. I got a taste of what it's like, and I've had a great time. Met some incredible people, really fascinating people. I camped in a tent for 2 weeks with a US Marine who was like the nicest guy I've ever met. Extremely strong guy. He was super encouraging to me. I woke up at 3 in the morning one night, high altitude, and I was out of breath, so thin you can't breathe. And I had to try and calm myself, and he was just totally chilled. He was just like, "Hey, don't worry, relax." So it was great. No, I had a good time.
Wow, that's the type of camaraderie that you'd hope for in that kind of situation, I guess. Like life or death.
Yeah, this guy he'd fought in Iraq and Afghanistan in the Battle of Fallujah, and he'd seen crazy things. So this guy was unflappable, completely not phased by anything. So I was like, I'm really glad you're here. Thanks very much.
Wow, that's really it's really incredible to hear about all of this, and you're balancing all of this with recruitment and being successful at it. And I guess how could you take off so much time? And is that just a feature of your company, or is that because of your position, or how could you how
So
could you do
S3
that?
is quite generous, actually. I've been in the company now 10 years, so I have 25 paid holidays, but we also have our birthday as a holiday. The company shuts down over Christmas to give us a bit of extra holiday, and that's when I did it, so I could And I made a special request to our CEO and told him I wanted to do this, and he was like, "Yeah, great, okay, go for it, support you." We have S3 gives everybody 10 volunteer days a year, so if there's something you're passionate about, you can volunteer for it, and it doesn't count
Wow.
as your holiday. So they're pretty flexible, actually. So yeah, I think thanks to my company, really. Um, we have workation. We let people work from other countries for a period of weeks per year remotely. And so people go to anywhere within 3.5 hours time zone either side of Japan. You can work. So it's a pretty flexible company, I have to say, despite being a big firm. That's why,
Mm.
thanks to them, actually.
Wow. That's pretty nice. Have you used that workation benefit, and do people usually use it? Mm.
Yeah, I mean, my team requests it quite often from me. I actually haven't used it yet. Most of my team have, most people in the company do. I do plan to use it to go skiing. So I'll probably go to Hokkaido and ski for maybe a few hours in the morning, and then do a full day, probably from like 11 or something like that. That would be very nice to spend a week or two up there. So yeah, I'm planning to do it, and I'm probably going to do in Okinawa as well. I'll go down there, wake up early, do a couple of morning dives, and then go to work and rent probably an Airbnb. Do some recruitment while looking out to sea. That would be quite nice. But a
Wow.
lot of people have used it. Yeah, it's pretty good policy actually.
That sounds fantastic. And especially to have it as a policy, so you don't have to negotiate it with your manager. It's just kind of cut and dry.
Yeah, and it's really good. I have to say, honestly, it's credit to our Japan country manager, Chris Riley. His sort of mission is he always says to make the company as nice to work for as possible so that you don't leave. And that's his sort of mission. So we have sabbatical policies as well for people who've been in the company for a number of years. And there's a lot of benefits actually, which is good. One of the reasons I stay in the company, honestly.
Mm.
Because as you know, recruitment can be a pretty tough job. So everybody needs downtime um, to refresh and to focus on what they like.
Yeah. Yeah, this is awesome, especially for someone that would want to have that kind of adventurous spirit. I could see how this would really suit someone like that. I'm curious on the other side, I guess the KPIs, the performance, like how does these aspects stack up compared to other firms or what you know of other firms in Tokyo?
You mean, are we very KPI driven, you mean, or?
Yeah, is it KPI driven? Are the
Mm-mm-mm.
expectations for performance like very high, and if you don't reach them, then you're gone?
Okay.
How does that look?
So yeah, we have KPIs, of course. As we talked about earlier, recruitment's quite a science-based job. So if you don't have KPIs, you don't know where you are. But I would say we're more KPI informed than KPI driven. And each team gets, like the managers in each team, set the KPIs that are suitable for that market. So to give you an idea, my top biller doesn't have that high KPIs, but he's got very high fees and he's really experienced. He knows what he's doing. I don't look at his KPIs and, oh my God, the KPIs are really low because it's appropriate for his market. I trust him. Somebody who's brand new probably does need to do higher KPIs. So we are quite flexible. There's no like mandate from above. You have to do these numbers. There are guidelines of what's considered to be good. But yeah, and do we, to answer your other question, we don't let people go very easily, actually. I'd say we're quite soft. Some people probably think we should be stricter. In the 12 years I've been here, almost 12 years, very few people have been let go, which is pretty unusual. Some companies are quite quick to fire you. We genuinely try and make everybody successful. As you know, not everybody's going to be successful in recruitment. And we have like performance improvement programs to help people, but I think it's a tool to genuinely improve people rather than to exit people. And so people do sometimes leave the company because of that, but it's rare. And usually, honestly, they're the ones who come to us and say, "Yeah, it's clearly not working. I think I'm going to move on," rather than us saying, "You've got to leave." So I don't think we're particularly hire and fire type of company at all, actually.
Hmm. How about in terms of the like kind of process and training? Would you say it's a high process, medium to high process driven company? And is it high training as well? Or is it a little bit more, you have some flexibility maybe with what you're doing, but and there's also not as much of the support behind it? Where would you say on that
Mm-hmm.
spectrum?
So, good thing about S3 is each manager gets quite a lot of freedom to run their division as they want and as it suits them. So there is a bit of variation between teams, but things that are standard. So how do we onboard people in S3? There's three things we do. So we have a professional trainer full time in our office. So she's native in Japanese and in English, which is quite rare. And she's a professional trainer, and she does classroom sessions with everybody, from new recruits all the way up to senior managers and directors, to help them. And she's running courses throughout the year. So if you join S3 as a new person, there's like a boot camp. She teaches you everything about business and recruitment. We also have something called S3 Academy, which is an online university essentially. And it's plugged into LinkedIn Learning. So we have all the tens of thousands of business courses there, but we also have our own, it's called an elements program, like the periodic table of the elements. And it takes you through every module that you need to know in recruitment. And so that's, people do that in their first weeks and months in the company. And I've retaken all those courses myself just to relearn and make sure I'm really familiar with everything. That's pretty good. But all of that is great and it's theoretical and everyone needs that background. But as you know, the real training happens on the desk. So the policy is that new recruits, new people sit next to their manager or a senior and observe. We do a lot of observing. So people observe the candidate and client calls, and then we observe them and they try and follow what we're doing. So I'd say I don't have a lot of perspective. I've never worked in any of the other big firms, but I do hear feedback from people who join, and I think it's pretty good from what I understand.
And work from home, is there a system in place or does it differ desk to desk?
Yeah, good question. So yes, we have work from home. In fact, we've got 100% flexibility. Obviously, we brought it in during COVID, and I was pretty impressed actually with how a big corporate company didn't immediately rescind it. So the way we work is we set the overall structure, which is unlimited work from home, and then each manager can adjust within their remit. So new joiners are expected to come in until they pass probation, because you cannot learn at home on your own. But anyone who passes probation can choose their own style. Now, it really varies. Some people come in every day. One of my top billers in the past who became a manager, I would only see her once a month. Now, honestly, I don't think many people can do that, but she's extremely disciplined. So at first I was like, okay, well, let's see how this goes. I was a bit worried, but she kept putting up great numbers, and I was like, okay. And actually, in her case, she focuses more at home than she does in the office. But I think most people probably are not in that situation. So on average, people come in 2 to 3 days a week, I would say, is typical. And myself, usually I'm in 3, 4 days a week, but I can work from home if I wish. So
Nice. I think it's nice when the management comes to the office as well. Because there's a lot that people can learn from those experienced staff, and I think a lot of the times those managers are the ones that are at home.
yeah,
At least that's what I've seen.
yeah, managers at S3 come in 3 days a week, exactly for the reason you said.
Mm.
You've got to be, if you've got experienced senior and principal consultants, they know what they're doing. But yeah, you can't train a junior remotely very easily at all. So managers come in typically at least 3 days a week, some are in every day. But yeah, there's flexibility. It's good, and we haven't changed it. COVID's a few years ago now. We've still kept maximum flexibility, which is nice, and it's worked out, I think. So.
Mm. And I want to talk about the thing that is on every recruiter's mind, the most important thing that everyone's working for, which is money. And I guess as much as you can say about maybe the average billings, or at least like the bonus structure and how this works.
Yeah, sure. So as you know, in recruitment, there's everything from companies that pay slightly higher base salaries and discretionary bonus. They kind of make it up. Then there are companies that have draw systems where you're in the red every month, and then you have a mathematical bonus. And there are even a few companies that have zero salary and pay you quite a big chunk of the fee. We are, I guess, in the middle of that. So we have a base salary. It's not a draw. So everybody, depending on their rank, gets a certain amount of money. And then we have a mathematical based commission structure, and it is based off how much you bill. And it's graduated, so it goes up to 45% of your billings. So it can be pretty good. It's honestly tilted to make high billers or high performers make more money. So it starts off and then goes up like this. So it's pretty competitive if you're good. What do we think is a good number? We expect senior consultants, the target is for them to make 40 million in revenue a year. Now, of course, there's a big variation, and the top billers are making a lot more than that. But that's kind of our guideline for where we think people are, successful. which I think is reasonable. And there are some firms out there which have a few very high billers, 100 million plus, very impressive. Those firms tend to be a bit skewed where there's a few top performers. And we do have a couple of people who are making, amazing money, but I'd say the vast majority of people are in that 30 to 50 range, probably.
Wonderful. I mean, thank you for being transparent about all of this. I think it's not common to be able to ask and again get the answers to this kind of question, but it's what everyone's wondering. And it does seem also interesting that it is so transparent. I think when we spoke, you were saying also that it's kind of published as well, what everyone is making in the entire company.
Yeah, if you ask me what's different about S3, every company is going to sell itself and say good things, and all the
Mm.
companies that are successful obviously have something that works for them. But I genuinely think S3 is very transparent and meritocratic, and recruiters are salespeople, so they're all going to tell you this, but we genuinely are. And to give you some examples, as you said, we publish all salaries, so everybody's base salary is on a scale. If you're this rank, you're this salary. So we all know what we're making, and the commission structure is clear. So I mean, I don't do this, but I can work out very easily if I want to what everyone's taking home in the company. So it's just the base plus the commission, which is open. So we have a very clear pay scale. Secondly, that's fine. Some companies have that. We're not necessarily unique in that sense. But promotion, this is where it's really interesting. Everyone in the company has their next level promotion targets set in our HR platform. So we're all working towards our next goal. But the criteria to go to the next level are very, very clearly defined. And if you hit those criteria, you get promoted, regardless of whether your manager is a fan or not, or thinks you're ready or not. Everybody's got a very clear target. So it's very much an environment where if you work hard and you are focused on achieving quick promotion from an associate all the way up to a senior position, you can actually progress quite quickly. Now, some people take longer than others. Some people are more motivated than others. But I think there aren't many companies. I mean, I know because I interview a lot of people from our competitors, and one of the big complaints is, yeah, they gave me a target to get promoted, and then when I hit the target, they said, "Oh, we're not quite ready yet," or "We'll think about it and we'll come back to you." I hear that a lot, and then I've asked for clarity, but they won't give me a clear answer, and people don't like that, understandably. And that's one thing we've tried to maintain. So transparency and is a key word for us. Yeah, and the top leadership we have in our monthly meeting every month. We talk about what they've been working on, what we're trying to head towards. We publish a lot of the numbers, and it's a disadvantage sometimes because if you're coming to me as a senior recruiter from a competitor and you're telling me, "Hey, my base salary is this. I want you to match it," I probably can't. And so I might lose you because another company is going to offer you a
Hmm.
higher base salary. So there is a disadvantage for us to do that. But I think in the long run, it's the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, actually.
Well, you'll attract a certain type of person, I think, that values that transparency. And I think publishing a manager and director level salary as well is something that I haven't really seen before at other companies. So that's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, I know they're all on different salaries because I've interviewed some senior managers and directors from our competitors who are ostensibly the same level of each other. And of course, I always ask them, "Hey, what's your base salary?" And they're often in quite the same level. There's a huge variation. They probably don't know, is
Yeah,
my
it
guess.
depends on how much you're negotiating on your own, I would say, in a lot of places.
Yeah,
Which isn't a
I think
bad
so.
thing. If you're a good negotiator, then you can probably get a pretty good salary.
You
Um,
can. It encourages you to be aggressive, I guess. But then you're always wondering, is my colleague here getting paid more than me? Am I underselling
mm,
myself? I prefer to be in an environment where it's clear, personally.
yeah, where you can focus on the job.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. So, um, I'm curious, like for just recruiters in general, not besides join S3, what would be tips and advice, I guess, that you'd give to young people who are maybe just joined the industry or maybe they're a year or two in and struggling?
Okay. Yeah, you have to be motivated to be successful in this job. It's not an easy job. That's not to say it's impossible or super stressful necessarily or not really difficult. Most people, if they really want to be successful in this industry, can be, but you have to be prepared to work hard, especially in the first 2 years. As I said earlier, you are up against experienced people with deep networks, and you don't know anything, you don't have a network. So the first 2 years, you're going to have to work really hard. You can't get away from that. But I don't know in another industry where you can go from no experience to making pretty good salary in a year or two. Not many industries, enable you to do that. So I think work hard, but be very clear what you want to achieve. For me, honestly, it was just money, and that's fine at the beginning. Later, I realized I really enjoy the job. But if your reason is money, great. Join a company that has a transparent commission structure, firstly, and reverse engineer what you're trying to achieve. So, what's your number? If it's this much money, okay, subtract your base. Look at your commission scheme. That's how much money you've got to make from commission. What do I need to achieve that in revenue? How do I hit that revenue? What numbers in my market do I need to be putting up monthly to get to that in terms of interviews? Interviews is the key number, but obviously send outs, candidates met. How many clients am I going to need in my portfolio? You need to have a very clear strategic picture of where I'm going to be. And if your focus is not money, but it's career progression, usually that's measured by success, which is revenue. So it's all same thing. Then, okay, so you've now built a strategic plan. All right, I know what I want to make. I know how to do it. I know what my KPIs are each month or what kind of clients I need to be meeting. That's great. But then the recruitment is an insanely busy job. There are unlimited, as you know, infinite tasks to do. And you could work extremely hard all day and achieve nothing. So it's very easy once the starting gun fires in the day to work all day and forget the plan. And the weeks fly by. I mean, recruitment is a job where you never ever sit there and think, what should I do now? I've no tasks. There's always tasks to do. So the weeks can fly by. So if you don't keep your plan in mind and review it, am I on track? Am I behind track? A quarter can go by. You haven't hit what you wanted to do. So what I do every morning before I come in and open Outlook and the starting gun fires and, you're so busy, I look at my plan on track. Am I behind track? What do I need to do this week to stay, and what are the key things? And I always every day, because so many unexpected things happen, that you can plan the day and you should plan the day, but it's going to go totally off plan very quickly usually. So I always say to myself, if I only achieve 2 or 3 things today, what do they have to be? And it could be, talk to this client, or it could be find these candidates or send out these people to this company, whatever it is, and then make sure they happen. I think that's pretty important. And then every week review, how did I get on? What do I need to adjust? Remember, my goal is do this. Okay, am I behind? Am I ahead? So it's difficult because you're so busy, but I think you need that quiet time before you open your Outlook, before you talk to your colleagues on your own in the morning. Remind yourself, why am I here? What do I need to do? What's the mission? Great, I'm clear, let's do it. Sounds obvious, but most people I find don't find the mental space to do that. That is critical.
That is great advice. And honestly, I hear a lot of kind of the things I teach in coaching in this.
Mhm.
It's all about basically the goals, starting with your goal. What is it? Building that foundation, and then building your priorities on top of that. So what do I need to do to definitely get there? And then having check-in points. So you're describing basically exactly what I do with people, the kind of skills that I build with them. Some of them may not be
Right.
as disciplined as you, like at the start of their recruitment journey. But I think that building that, it doesn't have to be with a coach. It can be on your own. You can do it for sure. But just making sure that you have some kind of structure that you can, yeah, make space for yourself to think about, my priorities need to change actually based off of this long-term vision that I have and what I've seen this week, right? I was doing this job and I was executing on it, but maybe
Mm,
there's this
mm,
other
mm,
job that came up that might be juicier. How do you manage, between these two and kind of getting the vision of what's going to make money
mm.
and then be able to prioritize it and action on it quickly. That's kind of like the core philosophy. So it's interesting that you are bringing these things up, and it kind of validates me that this is definitely something that is universally important.
Yeah, I think you can apply that philosophy to any task you're doing, but especially in a task like recruitment, which is extremely intensive in the amount of work you have to do. And I think for new people who are getting into this, relationships with key people are vital. Not everyone's a great natural networker, but you have to build good relationships with the clients you're working with, whether it's the hiring manager or the talent advisor, because they will basically in recruitment, there's jobs that every agent in town is working on. Statistically, a 20% chance you fill those jobs. And there are jobs that only you have or only a small number of people have. chances of filling an A job, as we call it in S3, which is exclusive, is 80%. If you're spending all your time on A jobs, you're going to fill most of them. If you're spending all your time on what we call C jobs, jobs that everyone has access to, it's tough. So how do
Hmm.
you get those A jobs? Well, prove yourself, but having a relationship. So I think a lot of people I see now are a bit shy because we've moved away from the old cold calling, aggressive sales style, and people are much more online, which is good. But then I think they've lost a little bit of, don't recruit by email. You have to go out there and meet people and build a relationship with people because then your job's a lot easier.
For sure. For sure. And something I realized as a young recruiter is that when you say build a relationship, it doesn't mean that you have to be someone's best friend and have something like a ton of things in common with them and be, kind of shooting the shit about this.
Mm, mm, mm.
Non-work things. You can use that and you could even build a really strong ally that's going to be feeding you, backdoor information that's going to change the game. You could do this as well, but when we say building a relationship, and I want your thoughts on this as well, but to me it's just being there. It's like you're the person who took the time, come out and have a coffee. And honestly, the content of the conversation, it doesn't have to be extremely interesting and you come away from it like hugging each other. It can just be the fact that you are there taking the time that shows that you respect them in a different kind of way. And I think it's the same digitally too, just showing up and being present and showing that you're an expert and trying to give people as much as you can, even if they are offering you nothing, they're not even messaging you back, they're not liking your posts, or in the conversation, if they're not really giving you that much info, they're kind of tight about it. Just break them down by constantly providing them the best possible Joho and information that you can, and eventually they will be like, okay, Alex is an expert at this. He's always here. He's driven, clearly. I want to give this guy a shot.
Absolutely, that's 100%. So, look, there are a lot of recruiters. Everybody has the same slick pitch. They don't know. Their time's limited. If you're going to be successful, and when you start in recruitment, no one knows you. And so you might get a chance, but they probably won't give you exclusivity, and it might not be a great job. And so you're going to have to work on challenging searches at the beginning with a low chance of success. But if you follow up, you send them a report on how you did, even if they've given you very little. We do a PDF of our candidate landscape of how the search went. This is what we did, and I've seen it time and time again with people who've joined our division. It takes about 6 months to 9 months, but then the clients start realizing, oh, this person's actually really competent, or at least trying, and is giving the
Hmm.
updates. And then suddenly, out of the blue, a relationship that you didn't think was very warm, they'll give you an exclusive job, and then you're off.
Hmm. Even
But
if
it
you
can
don't
be,
fill the role,
yeah, no,
you
exactly,
just are providing them that insight
yeah.
of what you tried, what you did, what's the market. That's super
The
important.
vast majority of agency recruiters who are working on contingency, which means you don't get paid, obviously, until you make a placement, you're working for free, take a job, they work it, and they never tell the client what they've done because they
Hmm.
didn't find anyone and they move on.
They ghost them.
Understandable. They ghost them essentially.
Yeah.
And maybe they didn't get any interview. Maybe they never even found a candidate. But you should tell your client what you did. And even if it's an update, say, this is the actions we took. We found it challenging for these reasons. We don't have anyone. Tell them that. And they might not even reply, but they read it. If you keep doing that, they will, as you say, come back to you.
Hmm.
That's how you build credibility. It's going to take time, but you'd be surprised. Within 1 year, you can go from no experience to trusted, partner
Hmm.
if you're doing the right things.
And it's so simple. It's not astrophysics levels of, intellectual necessity, right? But it's something that a lot of people don't do. And I think maybe there's not a lot of knowledge that this is the best practice, which is partially why I'm here, trying to help people do this. And then I think partially also people just can't time manage. And there's just so many searches and there's so much pressure from their manager. And even if they know, yeah, I should close the loop with the candidate, they don't have the spent like the mental yo-yo or space to be able to
Mm-mm-mm.
do it. And then this is another reason, how do you manage your time? Actually, even though it doesn't seem so critical to you to close the loop with the client, or close the loop with a candidate, it's actually what is going to make you have a, way more time in the future and way more money too. So I think, yeah, just that kind of knowledge of best practice and then actually putting it into your daily routine, I think is lacking for most recruiters. So,
Yeah, it's, a lot of companies are winging it. They have programs, but,
mhm.
they're not teaching fundamentals and because they're too busy doing the job.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I fully agree. Absolutely.
Well, I would love to just continue talking shop on this. I think we're kind of vibing on the same practices and ways to treat candidates and everything, but we should probably wrap it up. Is there anything else, I guess, that you wanted to share before we do so?
Yeah, I think, look, advice to new people, the mentality you have to have is that you're running your own business. So imagine that instead of working for another company, you've started your own firm. And imagine you're paying your salary every month. If that was the situation, and you would absolutely do everything possible to make that successful because you'd be scared that you can't afford to pay your rent the next month. If you have that mentality in a firm, this is my business and I'm building it, and you do the things you would do if it really was your business, you will probably be successful. So keep that mentality and remember you're building a brand of you in the market, and ultimately
Mm,
your competency is important, but if you have good brand success and brand recognition and people know you're good, after 1 or 2 years of doing this job, clients you worked with before, if they think you're good, will start introducing lots of people to you. So the first 2 years in recruitment is tough, but once you get a reputation, you almost don't have to do much outreach anymore because it comes to you. And at that point, you're just executing, and that's when the life of a recruiter can be really good. So it's hard in the first 2 years. You just got to get through that stage. That's what I would say.
these are great points, and yeah, I fully agree with that as well. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on this and for coming on here as well. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, honestly, it was a pleasure and really interesting for me to talk to an ex-top biller who's decided to move on into a new field. Always fascinating to see life after recruitment. So I'm very interested to see where you go from here as well. Look, best of luck with your coaching and the platform that you're building as well for yourself.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. And we'll have to go scuba diving soon.
Yeah, please come and join us. We go most of the year. Find a weekend you're free, let me know, and I'll take you
Awesome.
to see some hammerhead sharks.
Awesome. I would love to. I'll send you a message after this.
Please do. All right, thank you very much,
All
Lloyd.
right. Cheers. Thank you very much. Bye bye.